When it comes to your childhood, it's really not a matter of if you had an unstable childhood, if you had a traumatic childhood. The question is how. How traumatic was it? Whenever I think of having a pity party because this bad thing happened or that bad thing happened, this bully did this teacher hated me unfairly, this other teacher did something, uh, parents didn't do this, parents didn't do that. I often think of a student I had many years ago. I was in contact with him for a while afterwards. We developed a friendship. His mother took him to the United States from El Salvador, and she was a single mother, and she had a couple kids. He was 3 years old at the time. He had like a 6-year-old sister. His mother would work as a housekeeper for various houses all day. She would lock her 3-year-old son in a bathroom for 12 hours a day, and 3 times a day his older sister would open the door, give him some food, and close the door again. That was his life for I don't know how long that lasted, like a year. Completely insane situation. And he's an interesting guy. He loves ideas, he loves books, he loves to talk. That guy can talk. He's like the supreme example of someone who likes cafe society. He just can talk about philosophical and political ideas all day long. I really like him because he's not self-centered. For all the trauma he's been through, he doesn't talk about himself so much. In fact, he can tell really funny stories about things that happened to him. In fact, when he had to go through the immigration process in his adulthood, he described this fat woman who worked in the immigration office having a pig nose and being in love with him, and him feeling that he was going to have to capitulate to her desires in order for her to process the paperwork. He always had a funny, grotesque story. I absolutely love the guy, and he also had these giant, penetrating eyes, and you could just tell there was a story there. There was some pain and suffering he went through, and now he's a cop in the San Bernardino area. He's married. As far as I know, he's doing okay. I think he's just, thank God, his hardwiring allowed him to have the resilience to bounce back from a pretty traumatic childhood. I just cannot imagine being locked up in a bathroom at the age of 3 for 12 hours a day for such a long period of time. So, when it comes to your childhood traumas and any kind of unstable situation you had, it's really not a question of if you suffered from it, it's how much. And likewise, when you think of your emotional life, I love this term, uh, do you have an emotional dumpster fire that defines who you are? Uh, I don't think it's a question of if you have an emotional dumpster fire that's in your unconscious that directs a lot of your behavior. I think the question is, how bad is the dumpster fire? And I start thinking of when you go into a therapist's office. Here's the analogy I see. When you go into a therapist's office, you're pulling in a dumpster. You're opening the lid. And you're saying, "Mr. Therapist, Miss Therapist, this is the fire. What are we going to do? What are we going to do about it?" And I see essentially that there are 4 types of therapists who have 4 different reactions to the emotional dumpster fire you show them. Uh, Therapist number 1. This is the optimist who looks at your dumpster fire inside her therapy room. She says, 6 months with me is going to be the equivalent of a fire extinguisher. We're going to get rid of every smoldering flame, and you're going to be better. And I'm thinking, I don't think I would want to stay with that psychologist, that therapist. I think she's a little too optimistic for me. I don't see life as being that way. You got to try to work on your emotional demons and such. But man, someone who's going to tell me they're going to get rid of everything kind of in this magical way, whether it be pharmaceuticals or behavioral modification, man, I would probably not stay with that therapist. Therapist number 2, the pessimist. Pessimist is going to look at that dumpster fire and say, "Man, that is a nasty dumpster fire. I'm going to be honest with you. There's really nothing we can do. You're done. I mean, you just need to leave. I mean, yeah, I can prescribe you something, but geez, dude, that wouldn't work out very well either. The absolute pessimist, the absolute optimist, that would work. A third therapist I would call the hippie therapist. The hippie therapist would look at your dumpster fire and say, "Wow, man, what an amazing fire. Oh my, man, you got some creative juices in that fire. With me helping you out, we can unlock the creative imagination. That fire contains not only your creativity, not only your artistic vision, it contains your life calling, man. You're going to find meaning in that fire." You know what's interesting? I actually intellectually agree with everything the hippie therapist said. I think there is a connection between embracing your shame and suffering and your emotional dumpster fire and finding your creativity, your calling, your meaning. My problem is twofold with a hippie therapist. Number one, his style is annoying. It's just too annoying. I can't deal with that kind of talk, kind of casual talk. It doesn't work for me. Even though I was raised on the West Coast, people say that I have an East Coast type of sensibility. I don't know. It wouldn't work for me. The other thing is that hippie therapist, I think he's creating some unrealistic expectations. I think if you feel that by going into your dumpster fire and you're going to find this great truth, this great creativity, this life calling, maybe your expectations are too high. Maybe you're setting yourself up for disappointment. What if that doesn't happen as a result of going deep into the dumpster fire and heroically finding out all the machinations that create you? That could actually be destructive. And it leads me now to the fourth therapist and his attitude toward the dumpster fire. He's going to look at it and say, that's pretty bad. I can't promise you we're going to get rid of that bad boy. That is a nasty fire, man. I think what we need to do is manage it. Just manage it so it can't completely destroy you, so it can't completely define who you are. I think you'll find that if we can just tweak a few things and make it less hot, just reduce the heat a little bit, you'll be able to manage with your life. And I'm thinking that might be the best therapeutic approach to the dumpster fire that we all have. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that approach that has broader implications. I think in life, if we look at something that is absolute in our expectations, we're going to suffer from great disappointment. And that disappointment can actually make the dumpster fire even bigger and hotter. Perhaps wisdom is learning to appreciate the things you can do to manage the shit that you're going through. I mean, when it comes to eating, you might be able to just not be the super strict dieter like some people, eating flower petals and broccoli all day. Maybe you can just like cut back 20% of your calories by drinking more water and being more conscious of what you're eating and not eating in front of the computer or the TV. Maybe that's a management of your eating. Maybe you can be a better husband in your marriage just by trying to be more polite. It's not going to be a panacea to your marriage, or also cutting back your internet use, limiting your internet use. These are not going to be panaceas for your marriage, but maybe they'll tweak it in such a way that you can manage some of the tension that you find naturally arises from living with someone in a marital situation. So maybe just management is the key. But it's funny. What I just said is in many ways antithetical to American consumerism, because we love to sell you panaceas and absolutes. And it's so funny. I find that it's ironic that these absolute promises actually lead to such crushing disappointment that they feed the dumpster fire all the more. And this could apply if you were a watch obsessive and you're looking for the great holy grail, which may not exist for you, my man. But that's my dumpster fire talk for the day. I'm completely fascinated by the subject. I'm sure this conversation is not closed. I'm sure I'll have more to say about it later. Until then, I'm gone.